Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. As always, I am your host, Dylan Brewski, and I am so excited to be here with you on this Monday night after an amazing pay-per-view. UFC 275 exceeded all expectations. This fight card was absolutely insane from top to bottom. Just unbelievable. We had two amazing title fights. We had a true legend of the game retire, and I'm very excited to talk about her a little bit more. But I mean, this card has to be in the running for fight card of the year, right up there with UFC London that happened back in March. I gotta say, those two are probably the best two so far. We have a running for fight of the year in the main event. There's a lot to talk about. Also, I'll be giving my predictions for UFC Fight Night Austin, which is headlined by Calvin Kattar and Josh Emmett. So stay tuned for that also. But let's deep dive into UFC 275. Starting off with maybe not the most exciting fight, but it was a good technical fight. Ramona Pascal versus Jocelyne Edwards. Again, this fight wasn't the most exciting fight in the world, but Jocelyne Edwards looked really good. She used those kicks to perfection. She was able to keep the grappler and Pascal at bay for most of the fight. Pascal only landed 1 of 11 takedowns. She really struggled, and Pascal struggled to get anything going. She got outstruck by over 100 strikes. So, I mean, it was just a really good performance for Jocelyne Edwards throughout the entire fight. Ramona Pascal just didn't seem to get anything going the entire fight. So, huge props to Jocelyne Edwards. Like I said last week, every single fight in this featherweight, the women's featherweight division, is huge because there is really no featherweight division right now. So a win could get you a title shot for all we know. Not sure if Jocelyne Edwards earned a title shot in this fight, but nonetheless, she did get a big win over a tough opponent, Ramona Pascal. Next up, we have Liang Na getting absolutely rocked by Silvana Gomez-Juarez. There's not a whole lot to talk about in this fight. It was only a minute and a half long, or just under a minute and a half. But man, Gomez-Juarez with a beautiful right hand. You don't see a lot of knockouts like that, especially in the strawweight division, where they're just completely out. But that was a very impressive knockout by Gomez-Juarez. Big win for her also to get back on the winning side of things. Next up, we have an absolute war. Kyung Ho Kong versus Bakary Dana. These two guys went at it. They really put it all on the line, and it was an amazing fight from start to finish. Both landed 100+ strikes. Kong did land at a much higher rate. Dana threw over 100 more strikes than he did, but only landed 10 more. And really, Kong did have the more significant of the strikes in this matchup. I mean, if you look at Dana's face afterwards, he looked unrecognizable. He got beat up for 15 minutes, but he did not ever give up. He was still throwing punches. He was still landing a few times too. But great performance by both, but especially Kyung Ho Kong for getting the win. Next up, Brendan Allen versus Jacob Malkin. This might have been the most boring, quote-unquote, fight of the night. Even though Malkin controlled a lot of the fight on the ground, he was on top quite a bit. I honestly fully agree with the judge's decision to give that fight to Brendan Allen. You can't, unfortunately for Malkin, you can't just take someone down and not even have the threat of finishing them. You don't get to just take someone down and lay on top of them for 15 minutes and expect to win, especially against a very capable grappler in Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen is a great grappler, and it didn't do anything for him. Brendan Allen was more active when he was on his back. He was hitting him with elbows, hitting him with strikes, trying to get up at all times, while Malkin just stayed in the same position the whole time. I fully agree that Malkin got that second round, which I believe all three of the judges gave him. But I mean, other than that, when Brendan Allen's getting back up and he's hitting you with strikes, you're not going to win when you just take someone to the ground. Again, especially against a high caliber grappler like Brendan Allen. So huge props to the judges for getting that one right, at least in my opinion. I know there is a lot of controversy surrounding that fight right now, but I do think the judges got it right, because you can't just lay on someone and do absolutely zero damage to him and expect to win. Next up, we have the great debut of Maha versus Steve Garcia. This fight was absolutely great in the very short amount of time that it was. But Maha debut, 22 years old, third youngest fighter on the roster. Both Daniel Cormier, well, all three, I should say, Daniel Cormier, Michael Bisping, John Anik, the commentary team, all hyping up that right hand of Maha, and he was able to land it so clean, talking about how it's like a piston coming out of there, and bam, he rocked him, made him face plant. That was awesome. So huge debut for Maha, but another fight that there's not a whole lot to talk about, unfortunately. But next up, we have Sungwoo Choi versus Josh Kulabau, another fight kind of like the Kyung Ho Kong and Bakary Denal fight, that these guys went to absolute war. It was a decision, yes, but sometimes decision fights can be insanely fun to watch, and this is a prime example of it. They weren't as active as the Kong and Denal fight, but nonetheless, they were landing absolute bombs on each other, especially Josh Kulabau. He got 2 knockdowns in this fight. One judge actually gave the fight to Sungwoo Choi, which I didn't really understand. I think Sungwoo Choi got the third round, and I believe all 3 judges had it 29-28, but one did have it for Choi. I don't really see how Sungwoo Choi got either of the first 2 rounds. I think Josh Kulabau easily got both of those rounds, capping both of them off with a knockdown. But nonetheless, whatever. The right person won this fight, and it was an absolute masterclass of striking. It was unbelievable. Super fun fight to watch. Next up, the first fight on the main card, Jack Della Madeleine versus Ramazan Amiv. Again, another pretty short fight. It was a little bit longer than the previous 2 that I've talked about. And this one was action-packed in the 2.5 minutes that it went. Ramazan actually looked really good in the beginning. He was able to get a takedown, but unfortunately for him, he wasn't able to hold it for that long. And then Della Madeleine hit him with these 2 just brutal body shots. Every time I see shots like that hit him right in the liver, I just cringe. I've never been hit like that in the liver, but I could only imagine the pain that you experience when getting hit there. It's got to be brutal, especially when you look at some of these guys when they get hit in the liver and they just drop instantly, kind of like the case in this fight. So another huge one for Della Madeleine, a huge guy that's rising in the rankings very, very quickly, and will be a problem, at least in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, for years to come. Absolute masterclass performance from him. Next up, Andre Fialio versus Jake Matthews. I was really excited for this fight coming in, but I'll be honest, I was a little more excited to see how Fialio did. But this fight was all Jake Matthews. He looked absolutely fantastic, and what made it even more impressive is he did it on the feet. He's known for being a tremendous wrestler. He's an amazing wrestler, and that's something I will never hold against him. He's amazing. But I don't even think he attempted a takedown. His striking was on point. His defense was on point. It was unbelievable. And then he just landed that crazy combination and then followed it up, was able to get the KO victory, hit him with the Michael Jordan shrug at the end of it. It was an amazing performance for Jake Matthews, who we haven't really seen a whole lot of in recent months. I think he hadn't fought in over a year or close to. So great to see him back. Great to see him have a performance like that, and it was really fun to watch. Next up is really, let's be honest, most of the reason that anybody would have got this pay-per-view, the final 3 fights, starting off with the rematch of the epic, the greatest women's fight in MMA history, Yang Weili versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I was so excited for this rematch after the last time these two fought, but this one was an absolute domination for Yang Weili. She was fantastic in this fight. Absolutely unreal. She had 3 takedowns. She was incredible on the feet, just overall. And then to top it off with a spinning back fist highlight reel knockout was absolutely awesome. After that performance, you can't deny her a title shot against Carla Esparza. I've been one of the biggest advocates for Marina Rodriguez getting a title shot. But after that, man, you can't deny it. Yang Weili deserves the next title shot. And honestly, she's probably going to beat Carla Esparza. She should beat Carla Esparza. So should Rose. But nonetheless, that's a conversation for another day. But I do think that Yang Weili would absolutely destroy Carla Esparza. But that wasn't really the biggest news for this fight. Afterwards, I watched her take her gloves off during the official decision, and I was worried. Joanna Jędrzejczyk did retire from MMA after this fight. As bummed as I am to see her go, because she has always been one of my favorite fighters to watch. She is one of the greatest Muay Thai practitioners we have ever seen. Just an amazing striker. So entertaining to watch. She is a true legend of the UFC. She is one of the greatest women's fighters the UFC, that women's MMA has ever seen. And just without a doubt, a future Hall of Famer, a former champion. She held that title for a while too. Absolutely amazing career for Joanna. Again, I'm bummed to see her go because she was so entertaining. But at the same time, I'm very excited to see where she takes her career after this, what she decides to do. Congratulations to Joanna. Congratulations on her career. Can't wait to see what you do next. But we do have 2 title fights to talk about, starting off with the co-main event. Valentina Shevchenko, the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, women's fighter on the planet, took on Taila Santos. And this was highway robbery. We should have a new champion. 100% should have a new champion. Taila Santos won the first 3 rounds. She dominated rounds 1 and 2. I'll give Valentina credit. She won round 4 and 5. 100% won rounds 4 and 5. but that was after an accidental headbutt that fractured the orbital bone or broke the orbital bone for Talia Santos, and her eye was swollen shut. I didn't think the doctor was going to let it go on because that eye was completely swollen shut. But, I mean, Talia Santos came so close to finishing that fight multiple times. I don't see how you give that fight to Valentina, especially the one judge that gave it to her 49-46. There is no way that Valentina won rounds 1 or 2. There is absolutely no way that Valentina won either of those rounds. And in my opinion, I think Talia Santos won round 3. I think this was highway robbery. I think the instant Talia Santos is able to fight again, this has to be a rematch. You don't see a lot of challengers getting rematches immediately. This is one of those cases. 1,000% one of those cases. This needs to be a rematch immediately when Santos is healthy. But I'm getting worked up about that. I think that was a horrible decision. But now for something that ended up not needing to go to decision. The main event, Glover Teixeira was this close to defending his light heavyweight title. That close, 30 seconds away from defending his title. And then Yuri Prochazka hit that rear naked choke. And he got him to submit. This was an absolute masterpiece of a championship fight. So far, the first half of the year, we're in June now, first half of the year, that's fight of the year. 100%. The stakes, what this fight did for both of these guys' career was absolutely amazing. Both fighters look fantastic, especially Glover. I thought Glover was going to struggle, I'm not going to lie. I thought he was going to struggle hard. I thought the speed, the power of Yuri Prochazka was going to give him all sorts of fits. But Glover was the one getting in dominant positions. He was getting takedowns. He was landing huge strikes too. Not as many as Yuri, but he was landing big strikes. There was one point I thought Glover was going to win by TKO, but then he pulled guard. And I was like, no. You had him where you needed him. I get it. Glover Teixeira is a submission master, jiu-jitsu master. But when you have a guy like that in that position, you have to keep going. You have to get the TKO victory. But man, the judges had it for Glover. It didn't matter how you scored the 5th round. 2 of the judges were giving that fight to Glover Teixeira, and he was successfully defended his belt. But, I mean, you still got to give props to Yuri. It's not like he got beat up for 24 and a half minutes and then snuck a submission out of nowhere. It's not the Holly Holm-Miesha Tate fight where Miesha Tate got beat up for 24 and a half minutes and then sunk in a choke and got the win. No, this wasn't the case. This was an absolute war on both parts. Congratulations to both fighters, but I think an immediate rematch. If Glover wants it. Glover didn't say he was retiring. He tweeted out, rematch, ? Tag Dana White. This has to be a rematch. This was an instant classic. This is right up there. In terms of light heavyweight fights, this is right up there. It might have surpassed John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson won the first fight that they had. 100%. That was an amazing fight on both sides. Huge props to Yuri Prochazka for becoming the light heavyweight champion. I can't wait to see where this division goes in the future. I've talked endlessly about this division, and there's so much excitement surrounding it. But congratulations to both fighters, but especially Yuri for winning the title. But that is enough about that amazing fight card, as much as I wish there was more to talk about with it because it was amazing. But now is time for some fight predictions. For UFC Fight Night, Calvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett is the headliner for that one. But first fight of the night will be Roman Dolidze versus Kyle Daukaus. In this matchup, we got two grapplers going head-to-head. Dolidze is a bit better on the feet, but is much more comfortable on the ground. One thing that does concern me for Roman Dolidze in this fight is Kyle Daukaus has tremendous takedown defense, for one, and for two, his specialty, at least as of late, is the Darce choke, which you going in for a takedown exposes that neck. Kyle Daukaus could lock it in just like that. I mean, 5 of his 11 pro MMA wins have come from a Darce choke. I think Kyle Daukaus is going to win this fight. I think he's going to win it early, too. I'm going first round submission via the Darce choke for Kyle Daukaus. Next up is Phil Haas versus Darren Nguyen. This matchup, well-rounded Phil Haas, tremendous wrestler in Darren Nguyen. Phil Haas has been much more active than Darren Nguyen. Phil Haas had 4 fights in 2021. This is his first fight of 2022. But Darren Nguyen hasn't fought since 2020. This fight has been canceled 2 times, but it was on the part of Darren Nguyen. I believe he had an injury, so that was probably the reason he had been inactive for so long. But I do think the inactiveness of Darren Nguyen is going to hurt him in the end, in addition to the fact that, one, Phil Haas has never been taken down in the UFC. He has 100% takedown defense, and he's had many fights in the UFC. Plus, Phil Haas has a 7.5 inch reach advantage in this fight. That's enormous. Darren Nguyen's only 5'6", and he's fighting at middleweight. I think that Phil Haas is going to be able to keep him at a distance. I don't see him getting a finish, anything like that. But I do have Phil Haas winning this fight by decision. Next up, we have Eddie Wineland versus Cody Stamann, 2 guys that have struggled immensely as of recent. Wineland's dropped his last 2. Stamann has dropped his last 3. Both guys do have a lot of experience, though, so I don't see this being like they're getting in their head or anything, coming in with their head down, oh, I can't win anything. They've had their ups and downs in the career. Eddie Wineland is much more of a striker and has amazing takedown defense, which will bode well for him, as Cody Stamann is much more of a grappler. He is a wrestler, but he has struggled lately getting those takedowns. I do think Wineland's going to win this fight, but I don't think he'll be able to finish Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann is a tough guy, so I don't see him getting knocked out or anything. But Eddie Wineland's going to win this fight by decision. And then next up, we have Maria Oliveira versus Gloria de Paula, a great strikers duel in the women's strawweight division. De Paula is trying to string together some wins in the UFC, coming off her first win in the UFC, which was her debut back in February, where Maria Oliveira is searching for her first UFC win after losing her debut to the highly talented Tabitha Ricci. Like I said, both of these ladies are primarily strikers. De Paula does have a minuscule ground game, but I don't see her using that too much, unless it's like a really close round and she tries to steal the round at the end of it, get a takedown. But I am leaning more towards De Paula nonetheless, the grappling, because she has significantly better defense and she absorbs almost half the strikes that Maria Oliveira does. So I think the strikes are going to connect more for Gloria de Paula, and she's going to get the decision victory. And then next up, we have Ricardo Ramos versus Danny Chavez, the jiu-jitsu specialist. Ramos takes on another grappler, but more of the wrestler type of grappler, Danny Chavez. This is going to be a very intriguing matchup to see who can get the more dominant position, as both of these guys have great numbers on takedowns, and they both have great numbers on takedown defense. I have a feeling it's going to be a bit of a struggle for both to, one, get in dominant positions, and two, to stay in those dominant positions. But I do worry that Danny Chavez is going to be a little too inactive. I think it's going to be a little bit like the Brendan Allen, Jacob Malkin fight, where Malkin just kind of lays on top of him. But in this case, it would be Danny Chavez laying on top of Ricardo Ramos while Ricardo Ramos is trying to advance position, get submissions, strike on his back, whatever he needs to do to get the win. So I'm going to go Ricardo Ramos by decision in this matchup. Next up, the second of the two women's bouts on this card, Jasmine Jasudavicius takes on Natalia Silva. Two fairly new fighters to the UFC, Jasudavicius. All right, sorry, that's a really hard name to say. Is coming off of a win in her UFC debut earlier this year, facing Kay Hansen, and Silva will be making her UFC debut. So again, two very new fighters to the UFC. Jasmine is very well rounded. Silva is more of the submission specialist, including fights outside of the UFC. Both fighters are on a roll. Jasmine is on a 3-fight win streak. Natalia is on a 6-fight win streak. But Natalia Silva also hasn't fought since 2019. With 2.5 years of inactivity, I can't bring myself to pick her. Without the UFC experience to go along with it, I'm going Jasudavicius by decision in this matchup. And now for the premier prelim, Adrian Yanez versus Tony Kelly. This one will be a striker versus a grappler matchup. Yanez is an absolutely fantastic striker and has won his last 8 fights, including a Contender Series fight and his first 4 fights in the UFC. Kelly is a bit more well-rounded, but is much more comfortable on the ground. Is coming in off of 2 straight wins. But at the same time, Yanez has never been taken down in the UFC. And like I said, he does have 4 fights in the UFC and has faced some decent grapplers in the past. So I see him being able to keep this fight standing and use his superior striking. I'm going Yanez, and I'm going Yanez quick. First round TKO. That leads to the first fight of the main card, Julian Marquez versus Gregory Rodriguez. Man, this is a really intriguing fight. Julian Marquez hasn't fought since April of last year, but is coming off of 2 wins in 2021. Obviously early in 2021, both by submission. He has finished a lot of his fights recent by submission. So I imagine that's kind of where he's going to go, but he does have some knockout victories early on in his career before he was in the UFC. Rodriguez was on a roll, winning 5 straight, but he did drop his last fight to Armen Petrosyan earlier this year. Rodriguez does bring the experience and the well-roundedness to this fight. I think that will be a big advantage for him, in addition to the motivation to get back on the winning side of things, get on another roll, and win a bunch of fights in a row. I think Gregory Rodriguez is going to win this fight, and I'm going by decision. Next up, we have Demir Ismagulov versus Guillaume Kutaladze. I'm very intrigued by this fight, as Demir is bringing in an 18-fight win streak, including 4 in the UFC, facing Gurman, who is bringing in a 9-fight win streak, including his last one against the highly touted prospect Mateusz Gamrot, who's actually going to be in a main event in 2 weeks from now against Sorokin. This fight is so intriguing. Guram hasn't fought since October of 2020 though, and so that's a fairly long layoff. At the same time, Ismagulov hasn't fought in the UFC in over a year as well. So it's such a weird dynamic. Ismagulov is definitely a good grappler. He's a good striker, but I do see him bringing in more of his grappling, as Guram is definitely more of a striker. I like the well-roundedness of Demir. I'm going to go Demir in a very close fight by decision. Next up on the main card, Joaquin Buckley versus Albert Duraev. Every time I see Joaquin Buckley on a fight card, I get so excited, mostly because of the spinning back heel kick while he's having his leg held by the opponent. But I mean, who doesn't get excited by thinking about that knockout? Though he is facing an absolute beast in Albert Duraev. He's a dominant wrestler, but I mean, I'm going to be honest, he's a great striker too. This guy truly has it all, has been on an absolute tear, rolling off 10 straight wins. Unfortunately for Buckley, I cannot overlook that type of domination. I got to go Duraev. I'm going with him by TKO, but I think it's going to be on the ground. I think he's going to ground and pound to a TKO victory for Albert Duraev. Next up, we have Tim Means versus Kevin Holland. Matchup between two experienced strikers. That should be really, really fun to watch. I mean, kind of like Joaquin Buckley. Every time you see Kevin Holland on a card, you get kind of a little bit of excitement there. Tim Means has been around for a very, very long time and has had some big fights on his record. He hasn't been as successful, I will say, but he does have the experience against high-caliber opponents. But then again, so does Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland did make the right decision, in my opinion, to go back down to 170. I think that's where he is as strong as everyone. He can't get overpowered like he did against Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori at middleweight. I think, like I said, this is his natural weight class. I think he's going to excel at welterweight. I think Kevin Holland's going to get it done, and I'm going second round TKO on this fight. Next up is the co-main event of the evening, Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon. I'm really happy they were able to reschedule this fight, as I think both of them will enjoy fighting each other. Two insanely experienced fighters. Neither has had success for a while now, but they have faced top competition in the past. It is a tough choice, though, I'm not going to lie, but I'm going to go with Cowboy in this because his lack of success is because he's facing the likes of Tony Ferguson in his heyday, Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor, Anthony Pettis. He's just faced the higher level competition as of late. I'm going Donald Cerrone by decision, but I'm going to be honest, I'm not too confident in that pick because this fight's pretty hard to predict with both guys just not being what they once were. And that leads to the main event of the evening, a huge bout in the featherweight division. Calvin Kattar, the number 4 ranked featherweight versus the number 7 ranked Josh Emmett. I've been looking forward to this fight since it was announced. I mean, in all honesty, this could have the potential to be a number 1 contenders bout. It really all depends on how the fights pan out for Volkanovski and Holloway, because of course if Holloway wins in July, you're not going to not give Volkanovski a rematch, especially after he won the first 2 fights between those two. And then also it will depend on Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez in mid-July, because honestly, I don't think if Brian Ortega wins that they would give him a title shot just because he's had 2 shots already. But if Yair Rodriguez beats Brian Ortega, it's going to be pretty hard to deny him that title shot. But back to this fight, Calvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett. Both guys are highly talented strikers. Josh Emmett does have a bit more of a ground game, but Kattar has almost a 90% takedown defense percentage. So I don't see grappling being a huge factor in this fight, just because Calvin Kattar is so good at defending it. Calvin Kattar looked absolutely amazing versus Giga Chikadze earlier this year in the first event of 2022. And he has the more recent 5-round experience. Josh Emmett does have 5-round experience, but I believe it was back in 2018 against Jeremy Stephens when he lost. Jeremy Stephens isn't even in the UFC anymore, so it's hard to really go off of what Josh Emmett will do in a 5-round fight. Nowadays, he is 37 years old. I honestly think Kattar has the advantage in this fight. He's had bigger fights as of recent. His last 2 fights were main events. The Giga Chikadze and then the Max Holloway, where he did lose that fight and lost that fight pretty handily. But nonetheless, he did fight a guy like Max Holloway. So the bigger fights as of recent, I'm going to go with Calvin Kattar by 4th round TKO. But this is going to be an absolute war, and I am so pumped to see these 2 guys go at it. But that is all I have for you this week. Thank you all again for listening. Next week, I will react to PFL. Will be coming back this Friday. I believe it's the lightweights and I believe light heavyweights. I could be wrong about that. I know it's the lightweights, but I believe it's the light heavyweights along with that. That will be happening on Friday. Plus, I'll react to the UFC Fight Night that I just gave my predictions for. And then I will give my predictions for UFC Fight Night Sorokian versus Gamrot. But until then, you can find me on social media on Instagram at Monday Night Fight Talk, on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. Again, I encourage all of you to please DM me. Please comment on this video. Anything that you guys want to hear my opinion on, I would love to give it out to you guys, whether it's just a quick comment response that I can give, or if it's a longer response, I can put it in my video, shout you out on the video if that's what you want. But please, again, I encourage you guys to comment, DM me, whatever you would like to do to get my opinion on anything MMA. If you want to hear my opinions on anything outside of the MMA, NFL, MLB, NBA, you can find me on SquaboSays YouTube channel Tuesdays at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. I do that with 3 other guys. It's very exciting. We got the NBA Finals going on right now. As you can see from the poster that his head is cut off, but Celtics poster in my background. I am a Celtics fan, so we got the Celtics in the NBA Finals. But other than that, you can find me on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube at Monday Night Fight Talk. But thank you all so much for listening to this episode, and see you next week.